In this next tutorial, we're going to go through and we're going to assign materials and UVs to our modular pieces. So I'm going to open up the material editor. I'm going to set up a multi-sub-object material, and I'm going to set it to be 4 materials. I'm going to bring in a standard material. Now I'm working in 2014, you're probably working in 18 or 19 or maybe a later version, and so the the material layout here is just a little bit different. Standard's actually broken off into a separate group from most of the rest of them. So I'm going to drag this over to connect it. If I double click on this, I can call it wall. The next one, bring him down. I'll call this one floor. I'm going to bring him down. I'm going to call that ceiling. And then I'm going to bring in one more. I'm going to call it trim. If I double click on the material, I want to select all of these pieces, every single modular piece, and assign the material to it. Now, to make our life a little bit easier visually so that we could see, I'm just going to go in here quick and just change the color of each of these so that we get a sense of where we're actually assigning our materials. Right? And so it's important to know as I do this that each one of these shows up. So currently you can see there's a bold bar around it with the little hash marks on the multi-sub object. That means all the materials are being assigned. So at this point I really only need one of my objects. So I'm just going to grab the straight and hide the rest. And if we open the material editor back up, we can start seeing where everything should be assigned. So I'm going to go ahead and element, grab everything, and just real quick zoom in, Control R, and kind of float this over to the side. Alright, so I'm going to start off by just assigning everything one ID. So everything now has the wall assigned to it. From there I can come in and assign the floor. I can orbit around and assign the ceiling. And then I just need to select the trims. So if I just deselect, I can now set those to the trim. And so now I can have tiling materials assigned to each of the different surfaces of my model. So in order to get good UVs working, I need to have textures. So I've already brought some in. I'm just going to drag these over and plug them into diffuse. This is going to be my ceiling. This is my trim. This is my floor. I need to tell each one to show realistic material and viewport. I can just navigate over to the main material, right click and say layout children for it to organize the display. Okay, so there we go. Here's my main piece. And so to get a nice base set of UVs on our object, let's go ahead and put a UVW map on. We're going to set it to box, and we're just going to square it off. We know that our model fits inside that 400 by 400 volume. And if we go through, and we'll just set it so it sits at 200 on X, Y, and Z, so we know it's right in the center. Okay? So that's looking pretty good for a base set. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say collapse to. Now I get this warning, right? Basically it's just telling me, okay, certain modifiers you shouldn't do that with. In this case we're just baking in the UVs, and because I did collapse to, that kept this as an instanced object. So if we look at all the other pieces, which I selected all of them and assigned the materials to all of them, they'll show up with the materials on them. Now, because of the way we built our modular pieces using symmetry, we do have some weird patterning happening. We will deal with that later once we know everything's working in our modular set. Okay, so we have base UVs. We want to clean them up a little bit. So I'm going to pop an unwrap UVW on and open the UV editor. So let's go ahead and start viewing individual. I can come down here and say, let's look at the floor. We see the floor pieces kind of 2 to 1, or fitting inside the space well. Ceiling is fitting well. I think if anything, the ceiling, we might want to just rotate it. So let's grab those verts. Just rotate it so it's coming in at the side. I think going across makes more sense for a ceiling. Now let's look at the trim. And really, there's the wall. The wall's alright. I think the wall would probably work better if we took the wall pieces and actually moved them so that the base of the wall texture was at the base here, so that the brick looks like it's sitting right on the trim. I think that'll look good. And so you can adjust this based off of whatever texture you're using. In the case of mine, I would want to take this and just move it so that the top kind of sits just like so. So the brick at the bottom, brick at the top, it's looking good. All right, and now the more work is involved when dealing with the trim. So let's go down to the trim. Okay. So we have our basic trim UVs. What we want to do is make it look like this is one solid piece. But because of the way the box UVs are created, it does, cause a little chaos with it in that, the pieces are kind of separated. So I could go through and maybe use my stitch custom to try stitching the pieces back together. Find each of those edges that need to be placed back together. The more complicated, the more difficult this would be. I don't have too much geo here. I kept my base model relatively simple. I can come in, element, and rotate them. If you have more edges, you would just need to stitch it more. Now I could take my pieces and I could start to move them around a little bit. All right, so let's see, I would want this rotated so that the thicker part's at the top, so it matches. Let's do the same thing here. For the top, I want the thicker part up at the top. I'm going to move him up. I'm going to move up this one so that I can work to line them up after. And then these two then would be my two bottom ones. So let's go ahead and maximize this and zoom in a little bit. I need to switch this over to regular move. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it so these guys are right on top of each other and lined up. There we go. Now we'll go into vertex. And just to make sure everything's lined up, I'll do a quick pass with my quick align horizontal. Notice I'm only getting those bars across. There we go. Just kind of get those lined up together. Same thing here. Just do a quick pass to line these up. We're lining them up by region selecting and grabbing them. There we go. And grab it from the side. Okay, perfect. Alright, so then I just need to decide which part of my tiling texture I want on there. Tiles left, right. And so for the ceiling, maybe I'll take this kind of rounded piece and I'll move this over so it kind of sits here at the base of the texture. Get a little bit of that dark ambient in there. And then if I switch over to freeform, I can grab this, and in freeform, if you hold control and drag, it will retain the size. And so I'm just scaling it so I kind of get it to match kind of up where the ambient is. Let's see how that looks. All right. That's looking pretty good. It's got the nice rounded edge on it. And so I could do something similar for the bottom portion. I think I'm actually going to use the block part here for this one. So I kind of come over here. I'm going to hold control and drag that up. And there we go. I'll just switch it to horizontal. Maybe I'll try, horizontal restraint. And I'll try moving this over so that one of the sides kind of lines up with the brick. Perfect. There we go. All right. So now by creating those UVs on those base pieces, the change got propagated out to all of them. Now, if I want to make adjustments, like say I wanted to do, say I wanted my brick to tile more, There's a couple ways I can do it. I'm going to right click and collapse 2 and say yes. Notice they're all still referenced instances because of the way I had set that up. I'm going to select these polygons. I'm going to use a modifier called UVWXform. I'm going to hit F2. And what that does, it allows you to do things like if I wanted to adjust tiling, I could go into the unwrap UVW and scale them. But in here, if I type in, say, 2 by 2 on UMV, you'll see it tiles that texture 2 times. So it's one way to kind of go in and adjust your tiling frequency. I could put another edit polygon, select the polygon on the bottom, put another UVWXform, maybe I'll tile that 2 times as well. Right, or maybe that might be too much. I might only want to do 1.5 by 1.5. How much you tile them really is going to have to do with texture density. You want to make sure that the pixels for your texture are consistently across, as well as the amount of detail that's in them. All right. Looks like my ceiling might need to go a little bit more as well. I can select that UVWXform. Maybe I'll tile this 1.5 as well. There we go. So I'm just going to right click and say collapse 2. And now that change has happened to all my pieces. So I now have a base texture set for each of my modular pieces. So I'll just, again, select them all, zero them out. And I'll go ahead and I'll just save this again. But I'm going to save this as another version. This will be my O2 version because I've gone through and UV'd it.